It's 4 a.m. You're awake, again. Not from noise, not from dreams. Just the weight, the loop, the endless flicker behind your forehead. You roll over, grab your phone, scroll without looking. Everyone's posting something. Smiles, wins, advice, drama. You wonder if they're awake too, or if their confidence is scheduled content. You don't want advice, you want silence. Not emptiness, but the kind of stillness that feels anchored, real, old. That's when you feel it. A whisper, barely there. Not from TikTok, not from a self-help guru, not from some shouty podcast. It's deeper, like the memory of something you've always known but never had words for. The voice doesn't tell you to fix anything. It simply says, you are not broken. You are not your chaos. You don't know it yet, but that voice belongs to someone like Faustina, like Porcia, like thousands of women history forgot, who lived through fire and kept walking. The quiet ones, the steady ones, the Stoics. Yes, Stoic women. The ones no textbook told you about. The ones whose names didn't survive, but whose wisdom echoes in every mother who stayed strong through heartbreak, every girl who bit her tongue to survive, every woman who carried a world on her shoulders and didn't ask for applause. Stoicism. You've heard of it before, maybe. Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, Epictetus. Men with statues and quotes on Instagram. But what if you looked again? What if, behind those names, behind the heavy Roman marble, there were women, living, breathing, breaking, enduring, who were more stoic than the philosophers themselves? What if Stoicism was never just a man's philosophy? What if it was a way of life passed down quietly, without books, through scars, glances, resilience? You feel it now. The ache of trying to stay calm in a world that keeps demanding more of you. More hustle, more smiles, more performance. But deep down, you know. Real power isn't in performing. It's in standing still when everything shakes. And that's what the Stoic women mastered. Not by shouting, not by writing books, but by living, choosing, enduring, with intention. There's a story, though history barely whispers it, about a woman who lived inside the Roman Empire, next to greatness, beside chaos. She had power, she had pressure, she had loss. Her name was Faustina, wife to Marcus Aurelius, empress, mother, survivor. They called her a goddess, they called her many things, but what no one ever says is that she might have been his greatest Stoic teacher. Imagine being married to a man writing about self-discipline and virtue while raising 13 children, yes, 13, during plagues, wars, betrayals. Imagine losing 8 of those children to death, and still showing up every morning wearing grace like armor. They don't quote her. But what if Marcus's deepest wisdom wasn't born from battlefields, but from watching her hold it all together? You look at your life now. You're not ruling an empire, but you are holding one together. In texts left unread, in the bills you pay, in the love you offer when you're tired, in the quiet strength you show when no one says thank you. Faustina knew that strength. She didn't write meditations, but she lived them. And isn't living the philosophy even harder than writing it? This is what Stoicism really asks of you. Not to be emotionless, but to not be controlled by emotion. Not to be cold, but to burn steady, not wildly. To understand that you may not be able to choose what happens to you, but you can always choose how you meet it. That's where your power lives. You think about the silence of your own strength, the heartbreak you didn't post about, the nights you fell apart quietly, just to show up the next morning with steady hands. No one called it Stoic, but it was. Because being Stoic isn't about being famous, it's about free. free from the need to be liked, free from the chaos of reaction, free from the illusion that life owes you ease. The Stoic woman doesn't demand the world to bend. She bends herself into resilience. She doesn't dominate. She endures, with grace, without losing herself. And when she speaks, it's not to impress. It's to remind you, you can survive this.
The room is dim now. The sky's just starting to bruise with morning. But you stay still, because something in that ancient quiet is still speaking. It pulls you further back, to the heart of the Roman Empire, to a man known as the last good emperor, and the woman they barely remembered, Marcus and Faustina. You know his name, maybe even a few of his words. The obstacle is the way. You have power over your mind, not outside events. But what you probably didn't know is, he lost most of his children, one after another, while ruling an empire at war, under siege, and drowning in plague. And by his side the entire time was Faustina. History doesn't give her much room. You get fragments, a coin with her face, a statue half preserved. Some historians accuse her of scandal, others defend her fiercely. But facts, there are few. Still, if you listen closely, beneath the marble and myth, you find something more human than any title. A woman who gave birth to at least 13 children, who buried most of them, who held the hand of a man breaking inside but too stoic to show it, who woke up each day to dress like a goddess while living through hell. Imagine that for a moment. The empire needs your husband. He's writing stoic thoughts in his journal, leading armies, making decisions that decide the fate of millions. But he comes home broken, quiet, and it's you, not Rome, who has to remind him that the soul survives. You have no time to grieve the child you lost, because another one is sick, because another funeral is being arranged, because your husband needs to keep writing books about rationality, and someone has to hold the pieces while he does. That's not weakness. That's Stoicism in its rawest, realist form. You don't learn Stoicism from a quote. You live it when you bury a child and still get up to feed the others. You live it when your name is dragged through rumors and you don't explain yourself, because dignity speaks louder than defense. You live it when you are seen only as wife of, but you keep walking with grace because you know what kind of power never needs to shout. Faustina lived it, not in ink, but in blood, in quiet, in the parts of history where women are expected to smile through sorrow and never ask for recognition. Now, bring it back to you. Maybe you're not an empress, but you've lost things, haven't you? A dream, a friendship, a version of yourself you thought would be here by now. And the world didn't pause for you to catch your breath. You still had to show up, for work, for people, for life. You still had to smile, like Faustina probably did. You still had to hold someone else while quietly breaking. Maybe no one said thank you. Maybe no one noticed. But that doesn't mean it wasn't sacred. This is where Stoicism isn't just a philosophy. It becomes a form of devotion. Not religious, intentional. Choosing to move forward not because it's easy, but because retreating would cost your soul. And maybe that's why Marcus wrote what he did. Because he watched his wife endure the kinds of pain he could only process in writing. Maybe he saw something in her he never had to name, because it was too deep, too real, the kind of wisdom that doesn't fit on a page. You might wonder, did she cry? Of course she did. But Stoicism doesn't mean never feeling. It means not becoming a prisoner to what you feel. Faustina might have wept, then straightened her shoulders, then stepped out to lead, to love, to keep going. That's the discipline no scroll can teach. It's the mother at the bus stop, holding 3 kids and a bag of groceries with tears still drying on her cheek. It's the woman in the office, holding in a panic attack while giving a presentation. It's the friend who never asks for help, but always shows up when you're hurting. They're not stoic because they're numb. They're stoic because they're anchored. And here's the part most people miss. Faustina's legacy isn't in statues. It's in the lives she held together, the strength she embodied without announcing it. We live in a time obsessed with visibility. If it's not posted, it's like it didn't happen. But Stoicism whispers something older. You don't have to be seen to be strong. Your quiet endurance is your monument, your choice.
You think back to that stillness you just tasted, that brief moment when grief and grace stopped fighting. But history doesn't leave you in comfort for long. It pulls you deeper, into fire, into conviction, into a woman named Porcia. You probably haven't heard of her, yet her story flickers like a candle in a storm, defiant, trembling, unwilling to go out. She was the daughter of Cato the Younger, Rome's most infamous Stoic hardliner, and wife to Brutus, the man who would plunge a dagger into Julius Caesar. But forget the men for a second, because Porcia was more than daughter or wife. She was a flame of her own. Imagine this. You're born into a house where emotion is weakness, where your father would rather die than compromise, where your role is to be composed, sharp, loyal, no matter the cost. That was Porcia's life. She grew up breathing Stoic air, but unlike the men who wrote about virtue, she had to live it in silence, in shadow. She wasn't allowed in the Senate. She wasn't a general. She didn't write journals. But when Rome began to collapse, when loyalties turned to blood, Porcia didn't flinch. She stood in the middle of it all, calm, unblinking, willing to suffer for what she believed. One night, she injured herself on purpose, wounded her own thigh, deep, quiet, controlled. Why? To prove to Brutus, her husband, that she was strong enough to be trusted with dangerous secrets, that she wouldn't break under pressure. Think about that. She harmed herself, not for attention, not for pain, but to demonstrate endurance. To show that her strength wasn't theoretical, it was tested. Some call it madness, but what if it was something more precise? A declaration. You will not protect me from pain, because I already live with it. And isn't that what so many women still feel today? Told they're too delicate for hard truths, protected by silence that infantilizes instead of honors, excluded from the real decisions, kept in the waiting room while history is made in the next room. Porcia said no. She didn't ask to be spared. She asked to be trusted. To suffer was not weakness to her. It was entry into meaning. And then came the storm. The assassination of Caesar. Brutus branded a traitor. Civil war. The world crumbled. And Porcia, standing at the edge of it all, made one final choice. She took her own life. Not in despair, but in defiance. Because Brutus had fled, and news came falsely that he had died. Her world, her cause, her clarity gone. She didn't scream. She didn't beg. She chose to leave on her own terms, in the manner of her Stoic father. Now pause. Breathe. This part is hard. Because today we know that suicide is wrapped in pain, in silence, in tragedy. We don't romanticize it. We don't glorify it. And yet, Porcia's choice wasn't the escape of someone broken. It was the act of someone whose code would not allow surrender. This is the Stoic paradox. They believed death wasn't to be feared, but also not to be chosen lightly. So scholars still debate, was Porcia's death courageous, or was it a misreading of what Stoicism teaches? And what about her pain? Is it truly Stoic to die when meaning feels lost? Or is the greater courage staying alive to rebuild it? You feel that question in your own bones. You've had moments, haven't you, when the meaning slipped, when staying felt heavy, when no one would have noticed if you disappeared. But you stayed. Not because it was easy, but because some voice inside you whispered, "Not yet." That voice wasn't weakness. It was you choosing to live on your terms. Portia made her choice. You make yours. And in that quiet defiance, there is dignity. Still, her legacy isn't just in how she died. It's in how she lived. With principle, with self-discipline, with a conviction that she belonged at the table of truth. Portia teaches this. You don't have to be spared pain to be worthy. You don't have to be protected to be powerful. You earn your place not by avoiding suffering, but by learning how to sit with it without letting it steal your soul. Look around you now. There are Portias everywhere, not self-harming to prove strength, but enduring pain no one sees. Staying awake for sick parents, waking up to jobs they hate to feed families they love, keeping promises to themselves that no one claps for. These are modern Stoics.
The fire has burned low now. Your eyes adjust to the dark, but your heart, it's wide awake. Because tonight isn't just about the names we remember. It's also about the ones we never knew. The silent ones, the faceless ones, the women who lived stoically, not in palaces, not in politics, but in the invisible rhythms of daily survival. There's no record of them, no letters, no statues, no scrolls in marble halls. But they were there. Stoicism was never just for the philosophers. It lived in kitchens, in fields, in cradles, in battle camps, in the quiet eyes of women who endured without applause. Maybe she was a Roman midwife, hands steady, heart worn. She'd seen death, held stillborns, whispered prayers no god ever answered. But she still showed up. Because showing up, that was her virtue. Maybe she was a slave, like Epictetus once was. Only she didn't have a master who taught her philosophy. She had to find it herself. In the rhythm of cleaning, in the patience of abuse, in the fierce refusal to let cruelty define her. She didn't need words like virtue or logos or ataraxia. She just needed to stay human in a world that treated her like property. And she did. That's the thing Stoic textbooks won't tell you. For every Marcus writing meditations in a tent, there were hundreds of women cooking meals beside dying soldiers, not philosophizing, but living the philosophy. Do you think they didn't know how to endure? They didn't need books. Their life was the book. Zoom out. You're not in Rome anymore. You're in a small village in 12th century Japan. A woman stares at the sea, waiting for a husband who may never return from war. She folds paper into cranes, not for luck, but for rhythm, for something to do while holding on to hope without losing her mind. Her neighbors call it patience, but you know better. It's Stoicism, unspoken, unnamed, but real. Or shift to the American South, 1800s. A black woman stands in a cotton field, sun blistering her skin. She's not free, not legally, not physically. But her mind, her pride, her soul, no one touches that. She sings spirituals, not to escape, but to claim herself. That's not surrender. That's Stoic rebellion. And today, they're still here. The waitress who remembers your order but hides her tears behind the coffee pot. The mother who leaves an abusive marriage with nothing but a car full of kids and hope. The teenager working night shifts to pay rent while studying for exams. None of them call themselves Stoics, but they understand the core truth of Epictetus better than most scholars ever will. Some things are up to us, some things aren't. So here's the paradox.
The most Stoic women in history may never appear in any history book, because they weren't writing about resilience. They were living it. Because when the world doesn't listen, you stop explaining. You just become what you believe. They didn't seek status. They sought stability. Not perfection, but presence. Not applause, but inner alignment. And that is Stoicism at its most pure. But wait, there's a deeper question here. If these women practiced Stoicism so clearly, why didn't the Stoics write about them? Why are their names missing from the dialogues? Was it sexism? Was it oversight? Was it that philosophy was always built in spaces women weren't allowed to enter? Probably all of the above. And that silence matters. Because erasure is a form of violence. It's not just forgetting, it's rewriting the truth. And here's the uncomfortable part. Stoicism, for all its wisdom, didn't escape the bias of its time. But that doesn't mean it can't grow beyond it now. This is where you come in. What if you wrote their names into history? Not literally maybe, but by seeing them, by naming the Stoicism in your own grandmother, in the nurse at the clinic, in the friend who keeps showing up with soft eyes and a cracked voice. What if you honored the kind of strength that doesn't announce itself? Because once you start noticing it, you'll see it everywhere. And when you do, Stoicism stops being theory. It becomes a lens. Not to judge others, but to witness them fully.
The night has grown thick now. Quiet. Not the kind of quiet that soothes, but the kind that presses on your chest like a memory you thought you buried. This is where grief lives. Not always loud, often shapeless, wearing the scent of things left unsaid. And somewhere in that grief is a woman. Not a symbol, not a hero, just someone real. You. You've lost something, haven't you? Maybe it was a person. Maybe it was a version of yourself. Maybe it was the future you thought was guaranteed. Grief doesn't ask for permission. It arrives like a thief, then stays like an uninvited guest. And yet, Stoicism has something to say about that too. Not in the way that shuts you down, but in the way that frees you. Let's start with the assumption most people get wrong. Stoicism isn't about suppressing emotion. It's about understanding it. About looking at your heartbreak not as a failure, but as proof that you cared. Seneca once wrote about the loss of a loved one, and he said, in essence, grief is natural, but don't let it possess you. Feel it, honor it, then gently begin to move with it, not against it. That movement, that slow, strange alchemy of pain becoming perspective, that's the feminine face of Stoicism. So let's make this real. She's standing in the kitchen, barefoot, holding her phone like a lifeline, reading the last message he ever sent. Not angry, not bitter, just hollow. She thought he was the one. She thought forever meant something. She thought so many things. But life, as it often does, whispered no. And now? Now she's just trying to survive the minutes, one by one, without crumbling. She doesn't scream, doesn't throw plates. She pours herself tea, stares at the steam. That's it. No one would call that Stoic, but it is. Because she chose presence over panic. She let the ache sit beside her instead of pushing it away. And when she finally goes to bed, she doesn't pretend she's okay. She just whispers to herself, "This is pain, and I can carry it." That's not weakness. That's immense power. Because you know what Stoicism really says? That your grief is not your enemy. Your reaction to it is. Grief, like love, is part of the human experience. The Stoics didn't say, "Don't feel." They said, don't be owned. So you cry, then you wipe your face, and you do the laundry, and you show up to work, and you check on your friend. Not because you're fine, but because you're free. Free to feel and function. That's the middle path. That's the Stoic path. But this is where it gets deeper, because not all grief is loud. Some is quiet, lingering, generational. Some women carry grief that doesn't even belong to them. The grief of mothers who were never allowed to dream. The grief of daughters born into cycles they didn't choose. The grief of being expected to be soft and strong and silent all at once. That kind of grief doesn't scream. It hums beneath the surface. It shapeshifts into perfectionism, people-pleasing, or shame. But Stoicism offers a tool, discernment. A chance to ask, is this mine to carry? Or did someone hand me this weight long ago and call it duty? That question can break chains. Epictetus said, "It's not things that disturb us, but our judgments about things." And grief? Grief is full of judgments. I should be over this by now. It wasn't even that serious. They didn't mean to hurt me. I'm being too sensitive. Stop. Feel the grief without grading it. Your pain is valid. Your healing is personal. Your pace is your own. The Stoic way isn't to rush. It's to observe, with compassion, with clarity, and with the audacity to believe, I will not be broken by this. So here's where the lesson sharpens. The Stoic woman doesn't avoid grief. She lets it shape her. Not into bitterness, but into someone who sees with more depth, feels with more care, loves with more intention. She's not hardened, she's refined. Like glass in the ocean, edges softened by time, still sharp enough to reflect light. And you, the first light creeps in. Not blazing, not bold, just soft. Like a truth you're finally ready to accept. You've been on a journey, not across mountains, not through ancient cities, but inward, where all real revolutions begin. And now, at the edge of dawn, you're not quite the same, because you've seen Stoicism not as a set of rules, but as a rhythm, a way of living that doesn't numb you, but grounds you, in breath, in choice, in grace. So what does a Stoic life look like today? It's not perfect. It's not aesthetic. It's not about cold showers, ancient texts, or performative detachment. It's quieter than that. It's how you speak to yourself when no one else is listening. It's how you react when plans fall apart. It's the pause before you reply, the deep breath before you spiral, the courage to do less when your worth is screaming, "Prove something." Imagine a day in your future. You wake up, not to chaos, but to calm. Your phone buzzes. You choose to wait. You stretch. You feel the air. You don't let urgency win. You make your coffee. Someone cuts you off in traffic. But instead of yelling, you think, maybe they're rushing to a hospital. And just like that, you're free. You don't get the job, but you realize your value wasn't in the title. You have a hard conversation, but you say what's true, gently, cleanly, without needing to win. This is what it means to live stoically. Not to control everything, but to control yourself with softness, not steel. And here's what surprises people. The Stoic life isn't rigid. It dances. It adapts. It laughs at itself. Because Marcus Aurelius didn't write his meditations to be worshipped. He wrote them to stay sane, to remind himself, I'm just a man. I'm doing my best. That's what you're doing too. Doing your best. In a world that profits off your anxiety, that measures your worth in likes, titles, and urgency. You're choosing presence, That's rebellion. So, what now? You keep practicing, not for perfection, but for peace. You practice not taking things personally. You practice letting go of what you can't change. You practice loving people without trying to fix them. You practice speaking truth without cruelty. You practice rest, even when your guilt tells you it's lazy. You practice, and then you forget, and then you remember. And each time you return, not to some ideal, but to yourself. You begin to realize you don't need to be extraordinary. You just need to be whole. That's Stoicism. Not a mask, not a brand, not a test of toughness. Just the radical act of showing up as you are, rooted, clear, kind. And that kind of presence, it changes people. You become the person others turn to when everything goes sideways. Not because you fix their problems, but because your energy says, "We can survive this. Let's breathe." That's real power. Not in volume, but in vibration. Not in dominance, but in discipline. Not in being invincible, but in being unshakable and still deeply human. And when grief comes again, because it will, you'll greet it with open hands. When love arrives, you'll receive it without clinging. When loss takes something precious, you'll mourn and then live again. This is not detachment. This is resilience. And that's Stoicism. Alive, evolving, feminine, fierce, gentle, real. So, what's the final truth? Maybe it's this. You don't have to control the world. You just have to meet it well. With open eyes, with steady breath, with a heart that knows when to hold on and when to let go. You've survived so much already. And still, you soften. Still, you hope. Still, you choose not to become the things that tried to break you. That is a Stoic life. Not cold, not perfect, but real. And yours. The sun is rising now. You're tired, but not in a way that drains. You're tired like someone who has finally laid something heavy down. You breathe. You smile. You don't need all the answers. You just